Good day, New Zealand. Barry speaking for Voters' Voice, where once again I recommend that we all start applying some heat to the feet of the MPs, get onto them and make them earn their $164,000 a year. A little observation that may give you a little bit of amusement. Politics, in my opinion, is not a spectator sport. If we look at the antics of the politicians, I would say they horrify more than amuse. But to the politicians themselves, it's like a gambling addiction. Once they set off on that road, there's no turning back. They become addicted to the limelight, as they see it, and the decision-making that they imagine that they actually do, when in fact all they're doing is obeying instructions. So, as I say, in my opinion, politics is not a spectator sport, either for those practicing it or for us poor people who have to suffer under it. Therefore, it is much more effective if we become involved and start letting them know just what we think about it. I actually feel a little bit like the little boy who centuries ago had a story written about him where he, among a big crowd of onlookers, was watching an emperor stride down the street. The crowd around him was oohing and ahhing and talking about the magnificent apparel he was wearing. Look at the clothing, the luxury of it. Amazing spectacle that he's presenting with his clothing so luxurious. Where one little boy was pointing his finger and saying, "But the emperor has no clothes. He's naked, he's got no clothes." The comments of the crowd haven't really been remembered that well, but that little boy's remarks have. What happens in the future is not really my problem. I won't be around to see it. It belongs to the younger citizens who have to cope with how it's going to develop. And to date, they've been hugely distracted. And if I had to put my finger on the one main item of distraction, it's the cell phone, the games. And when I say the games, it takes my memory back, although I'm not that old, to how the Romans managed to entertain their citizens and distract them from what they were about, what the politicians of the days of the Roman Empire were up to. They kept their population amused and distracted and taken their eyes off the people who they should have been watching by building a massive colosseum and flooding it with the blood of the slaughtered who came from the ranks of the people they were distracting by the spectacle of that slaughter. And it was an expensive business to the people running things. Today's politicians are far more fortunate. The people who are being distracted and made to look over there, not here, are paying for their own distraction. $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 for a cell phone. And not taking their eyes off it for a minute. From my observation of people walking down the streets, it's a wonder the pedestrian fatality rate isn't hugely more than it actually is. So maybe it's time people took their eyes off their cell phones and had a look around the horizon and listen to what these people are getting up to and the situation they're being placed in by their Judas goats. Now, at the moment, I think this weekend in New Zealand there is going to be a protest organised by Groundswell, who have done this in the past, and good luck to them and good on them, and they're doing their best to make democracy give them something back. They're holding a massive protest all over the country concerning the farming situation, Three Waters, and how all this is happening, various bills being passed through Parliament to interfere with our privacy, how we spend our money. And I'm not knocking them for it. I give them full credit. However, as you may be aware by now, I hope, my approach to the problem is different. I think we could apply much more effective control if we all used a little bit of time every week or month to contact our well-paid representatives, so-called, and allow them to feel some of our anguish and anger. New Zealand ranks 136th in the fair wealth distribution summation of what's going on in the world. We used to be much, much higher. That means the wealth that's being distributed in New Zealand is ending in the hands of fewer and fewer people. And one of those avenues is the myriad of semi-government organisations who are appointing, let me say, both in central government and local government, who are appointing myriads and myriads of middle managers who are all getting paid excessive stipends for doing mostly 9/10 of nothing to the actual benefit of the population who are paying those exorbitant wages. And when our average wages worked out for New Zealand, remember that that average wage is considerably raised in the eyes of the statisticians by those numbers at the top who are getting the excessive salaries, $130,000, $160,000 a year, and those that are on 500 or $1 million or $2 or $3 million a year. In a small population, as in New Zealand, that are actually working, because our population is 5 million, but that doesn't consist of 5 million workers, of course. I don't know the figures, but I'd be amazed if it was 3 million. Average the wage out, and like I've said in past videos, a statistician can prove anything. So that's something worth thinking about. 136th in the world for fairness of distribution of wealth. Now, the reason for my comments on this it is a symptom of the direction that we've allowed the governing bodies of this country to take our country with very little comment or pushback or resistance or demanding that we retain a much more sociable economy, that we retain our democracy and our freedom of speech. We've allowed it to slip through our fingers until the point comes where we won't have it at all. I'm not alone in this theory that democracy is not working. No other august body than Princeton University in America. They ran a study and found the USA is not a democracy. One of the highest universities in America, questioning the ability of the country to actually perform as a democratic society. Yes, dead right. That's exactly what they found. Now, if you want to look that up, it was published on YouTube on July the 5th of this year, 22. And what was their solution? Well, I'm very proud to say their solution is exactly the same as mine. And I think I come out with my solution earlier than Princeton University did, although I had to crib it off the Citizens Party in Australia. But like your news readers, I won't tell you the facts of that. I'll just pretend that it was my own idea. Their idea, their solution was to get the citizens to bypass Congress and let the ordinary people run the decision-making process. In other words, allow the citizens to control their representatives instead of the party hacks and the lobbyists and the big money arriving from all directions that fund the campaigns of these politicians. It happens here too, of course. Something that I'm recommending we do here, so far without too much success, I might add. One of the reasons why this has been allowed to continue for so long, and why the younger people in our society, of course, have done no better. They've never seen anything other than the situation we've had in the last at least 30 years, but I would think more like 40, where the control of the politicians has gone from the people of the land to the few. And you can't argue that that hasn't happened, because the statisticians can prove that we've tumbled down the ladder of success and fairness of distribution of wealth. We are now engaging in a war on Russia, for that is no less than what it is. We have, in legal terms, declared war on Russia without consulting the population. Three waters is being put in place without consulting the population. Major changes to the way our farmers can operate is being put in place without consultation. Many, many things are happening today that are done behind closed doors, the decision making being made by the few at the behest of often overseas influences and bypassing the democratic process. The reason for all this is so easily accomplished is because the news media is owned and operated by the people whose best interests lie in controlling it for the purposes that they've so far managed to achieve. lack of democracy, lack of freedom of speech, a change in the wealth distribution. All has happened for a very simple part of it is the news media. They proudly call their news a show. Presenters are in front of the cameras, never one at a time anymore, 2, 3, sometimes more. Presented in the same way film stars used to be. They don't report the news, they report a narrative and an opinion of where they think the news should be going. Long gone are the days when a news presenter, I can remember a man called Philip Sherry, extremely good at his job. And when this change began to happen in the way the news was presented, he spoke out and told us what would happen, and what he anticipated happening is exactly what did happen. The news became a propaganda machine, manipulated quite openly now, paid for by the government, among others, to tell their story, not the story. We are being lied to continuously and now quite blatantly. The people that tell us what is happening have no conscience whatsoever about misleading us and deliberately doing so. I think that's probably enough for me for one day. And I thank you all very much for listening to me. And like that little boy in the crowd, I still insist the emperor has no clothes. Even though we're told ad nauseum that he's dressed magnificently. Leave it to you. All the best. Wish you well. Good health. Catch you another day. Cheerio.